Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Ungar, and this is the Industry 4.0 Club's Fireside Chat. We're really excited today to speak with Jacques Duperre. Before we talk about Jacques, just a minute, I'm going to mention to you that the club exists to help advance the deployment of Industry 4.0. That's our mission. We host interesting conversations like this several times a week, either around women in manufacturing, the future of manufacturing, people, process, and culture, or as we're doing here, Fireside Chat. I'm joined today by my co-host, Mike Yost. Mike, welcome. Would you mind introducing yourself just briefly, please?
Sure. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you, Jacques, for joining us. My name is Mike Yost. I'm one of the co-founders of the club. Been in industry for a long time and love having these types of conversations and helping introduce new people and new thoughts to our members and followers. So looking forward to the conversations here today with Jacques.
Thanks, Mike. And for myself, I've spent really almost 4 decades now in manufacturing. And with Mike, we're co-founders of the Industry 4.0 Club. So we're excited today to speak with Jacques Duperre. Jacques has decades also of experience in ERP, supply chain, and consulting experience. Today, he's an independent consultant with his own company called IQ Ace Consulting. He focuses on ERP implementation, specializing in IQMS. I want to welcome Jacques to our Fireside Chat. Thanks, Jacques, for joining us. You know, Jacques, I was looking at your background, and I see that you have a mechanical engineering degree from McGill, which is really a prestigious school up in Canada. How did you get from mechanical engineering to ERP implementation? I was curious about that.
It's funny. First of all, I'm glad to be on the podcast. Thanks for the invite. So the interesting thing is, my degree says mechanical engineering. I don't know that I've ever done a lick of mechanical engineering in my life. So that's how it goes, right? If I had to characterize, I'd say I've done a lot more industrial engineering than anything else. But as I was going through my degree and stuff, there's really a class that excited me. I can't remember if it was junior or senior year. But it was a class called Operations Research. And in a nutshell, for those who are not familiar with the concept, it's really a way to take a complex scenario and try to put some mathematics around it and solve it, mathematically. So it's all about optimization, all that sort of stuff. So I was really fascinated with operations research, got my degree, and then moved down to Atlanta from Montreal. So spent the first couple of years in Atlanta, just, trying to find my spot, my place. Ended up then going to Georgia Tech and going through the MBA program. And that's what really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there was this whole concept called supply chain, right? In engineering, everything was very focused. Supply chain was about the broader concept of running a business and pulling in all these other things that, as an engineer, I had never thought of, accounting, cost accounting, all that sort of stuff. So ended up graduating from Georgia Tech and got lucky, got hired by a mid-sized business that did exactly what I wanted to do. It was operations research, mainly kind of network supply chain optimization, route planning, route analysis, all that sort of stuff. And then kind of worked my way up to broader supply chain. After that, did a stint in what was called the Big Six. I don't know what they're called now. Yeah. The Big Six consulting companies. There's been lots of consolidation. And then went to work for a large retailer with a very complex distribution system, hundreds of suppliers from overseas, 4,000 or 5,000 retail outlets in the US. So that was very unique also. And then ultimately got caught in the 2008 layoffs or the downturn, and started working for this company out west, this small to mid-sized company called IQMS at the time.
Right.
So IQMS was a private company. They have a software, and theirs was an end-to-end ERP product that focused mostly on injection molding and assembly. So their customers were mostly smaller to mid-tier customers who did plastics and rubber parts for the auto industry, medical, all sorts of stuff.
So is that where the system, like where across that journey did you get introduced to technology systems as part of supply chain? Was it just when you got to IQMS, or was it?
No, it was before. It was in that the first job out of my grad school where I did the network planning and optimization and route optimization. That was all software based.
Okay.
So it was really modeling software. I had gotten, I'd always toyed around with computers since I was a kid. In fact, for anybody who's older than 50 will recognize that my first computer was a TRS-80. Anybody younger will have no idea what that means.
You're safe with me and Mike. So.
So we don't know what that is. Yeah. I'm assuming your target audience is probably a little bit large, about our age. So yes, that's where, I've always been fascinated with this whole marriage of supply chain and computer technology. So that's where, I worked with IQMS. I was part of their implementation group for 5 or 6 years. And then they went through some changes. They got bought out by venture capitalists. That kind of changed the whole work environment a little bit. And ultimately, they got bought out by Delmia, which some of your customers may know as essentially they're known as the people who own SolidWorks, right? So, they incorporated IQMS into their solution offering. I decided about 6 years ago that I wanted to cut out the middleman, and I had a bunch of customers that came with me, and I really went out and took that scary step off the ledge into the world of business ownership. I've got no regrets. I've been doing it for about 6 years now. Business has been great, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So my wife's trying to figure out when I'm going to retire, and I told her I've got no plans yet.
That's really great. That's a wonderful journey that you've been on. Obviously, you're out supporting plants, and the title of this talk today is integrating the top 4 on the shop floor.
Yep.
So I had a question that just came to my mind: is when you go do implementation of an ERP system, who's your client? Is it the operator on the floor, or is it the executive at the top?
Mostly, obviously the answer is it depends, right? The good old consulting answer, but it's less likely to be the person on the floor. It's most likely to be top or even middle management. So I'm going to throw middle management in there. They're the ones who would have heard about the solution. They're the ones who would have kind of talked to other people that use the solution. Unfortunately, the shop floor folks tend to be an afterthought in their world of, we're going to change this system and, we don't care too much how it affects the end users. They'll figure it out, right? That's kind of tends to be the attitude is they'll figure out how to use it.
Well, but I mean, that attitude doesn't usually make things a success, does it?
No, it doesn't. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But what I've found that makes a success is when there actually is that level of communication between all levels. Because ultimately, the people who are most involved in putting this ERP solution together are middle management and the managers.
Yes.
They get direction from their executives, and if they're lucky, their executives are there to kind of clear the way and in terms of hurdles that they might reach. And the ground folks are really they're involved and still working, putting product out the door every single day. So they've got, of course, everybody's kind of got their day job. But they really, from an implementation perspective, don't get involved until, in my experience, the last third of it. The first 2/3 is all about, data manipulation, porting the data over, and setting the right switches. And some of these ERP systems have hundreds of switches that will affect the behavior. So the decision in terms of what switches get set and how that affects the shop floor, a lot of that is made at the middle management level.
So is a switch, Jacques, is that a technical thing or an operational thing? Like you make it, is it a decision point that determines you go this route versus that route, or are you talking about a technical switch? I guess so.
Well, it can be either, right? So a lot of these software programs have set up screens where you can set up the behavior of certain stuff, but that how you set a drop-down box or a checkbox in the software can drive can very much influence how the end users will be impacted and how they'll see and feel the software.
And I'm curious, a lot of what, again, we're talking sort of shop floor or top floor to shop floor, right? ERP, a little better understood practices and structure than a lot of the plant floor environments where, MES systems or data collection, visualization type of stuff sort of tends to get oftentimes built on the fly. Do you find, and honestly, from an Industry 4.0 perspective, that space is getting completely upended because old architectures and old archaic technologies are just gone, right? And so, well, not gone, they're still there, but they're potentially replaced with things that are faster and easier to deploy and communicate better. So it's really sort of shaking up the shop floor level, saying we have all these tools and technologies available to us. Is that happening from the ERP system level as you see it, or in your domain, or is it still pretty structured that people are coming in looking for a solution, kind of know what they want out of the box and say, oh, I want an ERP and this is what I want it to look like?
Well, I think it's more, in my particular case, it's more I want an ERP because a particular ERP software that I deal with does pretty much run the gamut between the front end stuff, the reporting stuff, and they also provide the hardware that actually goes directly on the machines to kind of report up and down.
Okay.
A lot of the other software, you've got to tie multiple pieces together, right? You got to tie 5 or 6 or 7 different disparate or different systems and integrate those and keep up with changes. The nice thing, for better or for worse, right, about the system I deal with is everything is integrated into that one solution. There's very little need to connect, at least for small and medium-sized businesses, to connect to any external sort of software. It's all encapsulated.
What, when folks knock on your door and say, come help us put an ERP system in, what problems are they trying to solve? It sounds kind of crazy. I mean, I guess it depends on their situation a little bit, but what are some of the common problems people are trying to solve when they call it for your assistance?
Yeah. And again, it kind of varies by level. So if you look at the top level, I think the main problem I see they're trying to solve is metrics gathering and metrics reporting, right? Because if you're C-level, you're not looking at the details. You're wanting a much broader view of how the business is doing. Right. So at that level, it's all about that. At the middle level, it's more about trying to integrate and have one side of the business kind of not be blind to what's happening on the other side of the business. So inventory visibility, all that sort of stuff comes into key at the middle level. And at the bottom level, really, it's about making their life easier, right? That their focus is, how is my specific job going to change? And, is that less responsibility, more responsibility? How's my direct world going to change? Because they've got a lot of times at the lower level. And again, for better or for worse, you only have a small amount of visibility as to how things interact and how doing stuff one way might change anything downstream from you. So
is it possible to categorize sort of the receptiveness at those different levels that you just talked about? Mm-hmm. When Jacques shows up, are the people on the plant floor happy to see you? I know you're a nice guy, and so I'm sure they're all happy to see you. But they're like, oh, good, there's a system coming, there's improvements on the way, and we're excited to see you? Or are they standoffish, like, leave me alone, I have parts to make? And then does that change at all by level?
I think you're on the right track there, Mike. I think if you look at the ground floor folks, they're kind of a little suspicious and standoffish. And a lot of that, honestly, is really because of lack of communication or messaging from their middle levels to top levels. They really have no idea what's happening. There's just this new person showing up and asking questions and stuff like that, right? So initially, they are very hesitant to change. And it is if they're used to working on a current system, they're used to the navigation and the menus and all that sort of stuff. And it's different, right? People don't like change. So there is this period of adaptation.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And I've been toying with this notion for the last couple of months. Just as an analogy, my kids' school has an app that shows all their grades and their schedule and their missing homework assignments and all that kind of stuff. And they use it for attendance as well. And so, like, if my kid's late for a class, I get notified on the app. I get a text message. I get a voicemail. I get an email. And first reaction to me, the first time it happened was for me to go to my daughter and say, "Where were you?" She was actually excused from class to go do something for the school, but I kept getting all of these triggers. So I started to get mad, and I actually went to the school and said, "You either fix your process or I'm going to turn it off, right? I'm going to stop paying attention to it." And so the thing that's been going through my head recently is that if those operators you're talking about, they need to be in a different position than me. It's easy for me to discard the application and go, you know what, I'm not buying in. But if the folks in the business take that kind of an attitude, then your system's not going to function properly. So do you see folks able to help get their operators on board? Like, if it's broken, help us fix it or help us improve it?
Yeah, it's a lot better in environments where there's less in and out, where the workforce has been there for a while.
Okay.
If you've got more of a transient workforce, then it's a whole set of other issues, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you've got management that's kind of gone up through the ranks and lived and breathed and done the job that they're asking the operators to do, they get a lot better acceptance than if you've got a new hire from the outside who hasn't yet gained their trust. But I totally agree with you. It's all about kind of the, how is it presented to the end user? And a lot of times it's initial reaction, right? You talked about your initial reaction with that school app. It makes life harder.
Yeah.
You mentioned I heard you talk about replacing ERP systems. And I know a lot of companies that, especially as they grow and they add, additional systems they integrate into the ERP.
Yep.
The thought of replacing it, even if it's old, is like daunting. I mean, it's like, no, I don't want to do it,
Yep.
Yeah. So why and when should a company upgrade or change its ERP system? I mean, that's a tough question, but I mean, companies seem to always wait too long. At least that's my impression.
Yeah, it is a tough question, right? And I've run into some who never should have upgraded. A lot of
that bad, huh?
Yeah. Well, no, it's just they were sold the bill. I mean, they're tiny companies that really would be able to run fine in Excel, and they were sold, the smoke and mirrors on the. But those are few and far between. In terms of what what should drive a company to upgrade, I think growth. When a company is trying to, from the top level, right? When you've gone through growth, either through acquisition or within a single company, and you're finding that it's harder and harder to get all the financials together and integrate your financials. You've got different sources maybe, or it's longer, right? You used to be able to close your month at the end of the month in 3 or 4 days, and now it's taking 15 or 16 days. That's a sign at the top level that it might be worth looking at some of the alternatives out there. At the middle level and a little bit in the middle to top management, it's really about if I'm starting to lose track of inventory visibility and visibility to what's happening in the supply chain, or if I'm losing business because I can't respond, and that's based on constraints in the system, then it's time to look at other systems. But definitely you don't want to jump into a new system. There's a lot of thought and gossip on there, and some really good articles on doing some really good due diligence before jumping into another system. Sometimes you don't want to leave your existing system too early. In fact, I've got one specific customer, fairly large, and they grew up with a system they had created in-house, right? So they had a team of 5 or 6 programmers in-house who managed the system, who would create screens exactly like their customers wanted or their users. And they decided to go the ERP route. So they gave up the flexibility of being able to design screens exactly like they wanted to. And they're in a real bind right now because it's a whole change in culture. They had an IT group that was a bunch of developers, right, who were used to creating software. And within a year, that turned topsy-turvy. Now they had an IT group that was expected to really support the business from a business function perspective. And they've had a bunch of turnover. They've lost their entire IT group, really, in a year or so. People, the developers have left, right? They grew up developing. They want to create software, not manage software.
That's a great point. I was going to ask you about that. As far as the teams, like people who typically support the types of systems that you're installing, are they? Do you typically find like mid-market sized companies have the tech resources that they need in-house, or are they always going to need a Jacques to come and bail them out, or are you always coming alongside and playing a level of support, but they have their own internal capabilities? I guess from a skill set perspective, are you typically seeing
So there's a little bit of a mix, right? It used to be until 3, 4, 5 years ago, they had to have a lot more internal expertise in terms of database management and managing their computers. A lot of that's gone to the cloud right now. So they've been able, and I think that's a good thing. They don't have to worry about backups. They don't have to worry about applying software upgrades, that kind of stuff. So in my world, there's been a shift from the IT perspective, right, to having people who can support the business, really to be a first line of answering questions from their user base. Because you don't want your 100 users to be on the phone with the software developer, right? You want an internal expertise to answer some of that, to make sure all the processes are as uniform as they can be. So that's changed quite a bit in terms of how that's done.
Thinking back, you mentioned we were talking for a second there about when a company should make a change in their system. We run into a lot of smaller companies who maybe don't have an ERP system yet. You mentioned running off of Excel, but when should a company when should a small company, when do they know it's time for an ERP system?
Well, in terms of the actual implementation, right, there's never a good time to implement, because you're always having to take someone off the line, someone out of doing business, right? So the answer, if you were to ask middle to lower management, is now's not a good time, right? Let's put it off for another 6 months, or let's put it off a little more. But the time is really when, for me, the big measure is if you're starting to lose customers and lose business because your operations are so complex when they shouldn't be. That's really the time to kind of start looking at alternatives out there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had a chance to visit a small machine shop. So we're talking 3 employees. And I was surprised that the owner had just put an ERP system in. I'm like, I say small, there's like 5 or 6 machines. It's not a big shop, right?
Yep.
But he was sold this ERP system, and he was really excited because he was going to be able to track his orders more effectively. And I didn't think that at his size it would be the right time, but he was really excited about it. Have you seen small implementations like that before?
I've seen those, but it's like you said, right? You went in, you had a good feel that this might be overkill. I've seen small ones like that. The problem is it's buyer beware, right? A lot of times these software, at least at small companies and mid-size, are sold based on a demo. Mm-hmm. And anybody who's ever been through the process knows that the demo is not exactly what you end up with at the end of all this. And the thing a lot of people don't realize is, if I'm buying the system that's going to show me all this data and be nice and fancy, that means I've got to collect more data, right? So there's a price to having that data. It's your people on the floor now have to spend more time, or there's got to be more money spent or more integration spent on collecting that data. So it's not kind of a magic pill when you come in, suddenly all these screens get filled with great data. There's a lot of work behind the scenes, and there's a lot of change in everybody's everyday life at work.
So if we were, so my background is from the plant floor up, not in the supply chain and ERP space. And when I would talk to people and there were missing elements or missing data points that they want, it would be things like availability of the machinery or their uptime or their quality levels and that kind of stuff. Maybe two-part question here. One, do you get involved in that? But then two, sticking with the line of conversation you and Mike were just having, from an ERP perspective, is it more about you're losing visibility into orders and inventory and things that are more from a business side, or what would those sort of missing indicators be from the ERP side?
Yeah, so it would be orders and availability, but on the shop floor, one area that you kind of didn't mention that I see is becoming more and more important, and again, it varies by industry, is quality, right? Mm-hmm. Getting a handle on what is my efficiency, what is my loss in terms of material, in terms of labor efficiency. A lot of that you don't really get until you put a system in, right? Because if you're running on Excel, that information is not being captured anywhere.
Yeah, well, and that's a great point. And quality is one that I've always used as an example of being a problem in both domains, both if we talk about the shop floor area and the enterprise area, because the solution providers will talk broadly about quality management, right, and mean completely different things, right? So from an ERP perspective, you can have a large ERP provider talking about quality, and it's not the same as what the plant floor folks are talking about with the solutions that are getting into, stuff, getting information in real time and, statistical process control and all that other kind of stuff. So it is a good point. It's also really difficult, I think, to parse the language sometimes around that area.
And it is, and for some of my customers, quality is must have, right? If you're in the medical device field, you have to have you have to be able to present the paperwork when asked.
Right.
Some other industries, it may be less critical, but it's still something you want from an efficiency perspective, right? It's not regulated, but you want to be able to run your business and kind of see what's happening on the quality side of things also.
Yeah, for sure.
You've done, when a company wants to install, do they typically come to you for an ERP system, or do they go to a company and the company reaches out to you? Are you the middle person, or are you the lead guy? Well, or either or? How does that work for you personally?
Well, it's interesting because when I left IQMS, so they operate their implementation group as a profit center. All right. So what I've found more and more since I'm out there, and there are only a few of us that work on this particular, as independents, work on this particular piece of software.
Yeah.
But because Delmia or IQMS operates their implementation as a profit center, they don't necessarily let their customers know after the sale that people like us exist out here, right? So a lot of people find me pretty much when they get frustrated with level of support, responsiveness of support, knowledge of the system, all that kind of stuff. So more and more I've been coming in to kind of fix issues versus being there at the front end of the implementation, just because of the nature of the relationship with the software vendor themselves.
Well, stick with that for just a second. I'm sorry, Mike, just to jump in. Like how do people find you? Like, are you on LinkedIn? You got a website? Like, just real quickly about yourself.
Yeah, so I've got a website. I've gotten maybe 10% of my leads through that. Not a lot, to have a presence. LinkedIn was pretty solid was a good source in the beginning, but honestly now with my being a one-person company and that's intentional on my part, I just don't want to deal with HR issues and any of that type of stuff, right? A lot of it's word of mouth, right? So it's kind of like it's snowballed. Any business I get now is word of mouth. I'm on a couple message boards, not that I'm on, but I've been mentioned on a couple message boards where people are looking for help. They're like, hey, you look up this guy and that kind of stuff. So at this point, it's really word of mouth.
What are some of the reasons why people will reach out to you? So you mentioned nowadays you're coming in more to help people with problems they have.
Yep.
What are some of the common challenges you're seeing that manufacturers have in the area of ERP management?
So I think some of the big challenges are when that ERP system is put in, it's really about, click this button, and click this button to make it work, right? There's very little kind of training that's done on the front end about, this is what your area is supposed to be versus what you may have been experiencing for the past 5-10 years. Here's how it connects to all the other areas, in the supply chain. Right. And if you do this, here's what will happen. And here's how most customers kind of handle this. And here's the business scenario where you might want to do A versus doing B. Right. So it's really adding that second level of it. It really is a lot of kind of what I would call true consulting. Right. So you get a lot of I remember back in the day, right, I used to laugh because the true consultants would come in and never touch their computers. And they just sit there and chat and offer advice. And unfortunately, it's a lot of that as I come in and people get frustrated is they haven't been given a clear picture of the big picture.
So, yeah, I almost hear what you're describing is what's happening is they're learning how, but not why. Mm-hmm. And you fill in a lot of the why that they need in order to really internalize the process.
Yeah. And a lot of what another kind of area that I'm being brought in a lot is really on extracting data and presenting that in a manner that's useful to them, right? So you've got these big databases full of data. You may have purchased some reporting software, but your internal expertise for that kind of stuff tends to not be there just because it's something that's not done on a regular basis. So even if you spend money training somebody, if they're going to create a specific report and not touch the reporting software for another 3-4 months, they've forgotten everything they've learned. Whereas I kind of churn these out a lot more regularly. So I'm able to go in, create those reports a lot faster, have them offer more clear data. So a lot of it is kind of presenting the data and reporting the data.
I hate to talk technology. That's not my thing. But you mentioned earlier about like the cloud and some of the advantages of that. Are there any other technologies? 'Cause now you're getting into reporting, right? Yeah. And everybody's talking about collecting as much data as you can and having it. But are there technologies that you see that are of value in like what areas, like reporting and things like that?
So there's third-party reporting software, right? So stuff like Tableau or Business Objects. Now, the thing is they cost more money, and I don't know that I've truly understand their pricing structure. It's kind of weird. I've looked at it several times, and it kind of befuddles me. Yeah. So you get the those third-party reporting software, but that's like a whole implementation because you need a specific skill set just to do that. You need to support that from an IT perspective. I've had some customers use even some of the newer software out there, Python, for example. And again, I don't want to get too geeky, but using some reporting software that can really just reach into the tables and present some of the data on a web page, right? And it's an easy, you can put filters in and all sorts of stuff, but you can present the data to web users and let them kind of slice and dice the way they want.
Gotcha.
So there are a number of solutions, and of course the landscape changes. Ask me 6 months from now, 12 months from now, I may have a different answer.
Right. Well, and that should be why they have people like you to go to, right? Because I cringe at the thought of keeping up with the technology at that pace. But if there are folks like yourself around, they can say, Jacques, help us out. We want this information, and whether we have picked a tool set or we're going to ask you to recommend a tool set, like, how do we get the information? Because that's ultimately what's most important.
Because honestly, it's not their job to keep up with the technology, right? They've got a bunch of other things that are more critical from their perspective to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's really neat. So we're just one last question. for you. You've obviously seen what works and what doesn't work. What are maybe the top 2 or 3 key success factors if I'm putting in or changing my ERP system?
Yeah. So the success factors are really don't overplan it, right? So I've seen people come in with, we're going to put in this ERP system. We've got a 2,000 line project plan, and we're going to, those things never work, right? Find someone who has done these before. Find someone who's kind of independent of the software vendor if you can, who have your best interest at heart versus the software vendors. Those are key. Communication is another big thing, internal to the organization. Give your people the visibility to what changes are coming down the pipeline. Let them participate. Let them have a say in things, no matter what level they're at. And really plan and be diligent, and don't go off a specific timeline. I've got some customers who go off a timeline, and we've got to go live. We're going to go live. We've got to go live December 1st, come hell or high water, and they're not ready, and it just doesn't feel right for them. It doesn't feel right for anybody. So don't be afraid to kind of delay stuff and get your ducks in a row. But on the other hand, don't try to get it perfect, because if you delay and do stuff and try to get things perfect, you will never take any piece of software live.
Very good. Thank you for those insights. Well, we've been talking now for a good bit of time, and I wanted just to see maybe, Mike, if you've got a last reflection from what you've heard from Jacques today, or a last comment. And then Jacques, maybe a last comment then for our audience as well before we begin to wrap up.
Yep.
Mike, want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's great to hear from someone like Jacques and to hear his journey, right, from a formal mechanical engineering degree perspective, but getting out and spending more time in, as he described it, operations research and industrial engineering type of view of the world, and that shift, getting an MBA, looking at the business, looking at the supply chain. When we look at our space and what we're going through, that's all interconnected. And when you find somebody like Jacques that has that perspective, that understands the engineering processes, understands the supply chain, understands the business value, and obviously understands the technology side of things, that's really positive and powerful. And I think something for people to learn from, to take that perspective of looking at the business and coming back down to what the technology needs are versus, the opposite of people chasing technology. So I appreciate learning more about Jacques and him sharing with our community. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Jacques, a final word for our audience today?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and I truly applaud what you guys are doing in terms of getting the message out there, getting the correct conversations going. So obviously, I wish you the best in terms of continuing to grow your audience and grow the message. And at any point in time, if there are any other topics you guys would like to have me on, I'd love to participate.
Yeah, Jacques, thank you so much. I think one of the things that the conversation remind me about today, and this isn't necessarily true of all vendors, as we know, but obviously vendors are trying to sell you something. And what I appreciate, and the best vendors obviously are able to be objective and are willing to walk away from an installation that doesn't make sense. But what I appreciate about someone like yourself who's now independent is, hey, if I'm not sure, I can ask for your assistance, and you're going to be helping me do the best thing as a manufacturer that I need for my business, and helping me answer the question, do I really need to do this, or how should I do this? So thank you for what you do, and it's great to have folks like you available. As Mike said earlier, being an expert in everything that's going on in the world is hard as a manufacturer, all the technology evolution, and to be able to rely on individuals like yourself who stay up to date on the things that are going on in your space and call upon you for help. That's wonderful. So thank you for that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So this is the Industry 4.0 Club Fireside Chat. We've been talking for the last 40 minutes or so with Jacques Duperre. Jacques is is an independent consultant with his own company, IQ ACE Consulting. He focuses on and is really, I call, an expert in ERP implementation. If you like conversations like this, the Industry 4.0 Club hosts them, several times a week. Women in manufacturing, the future of manufacturing, which is usually a technical topic around manufacturing. Fireside Chat like we have now, and then also people, process, and culture. The club also is active in live events. This week we're at South Tech with SESME in Greenville, South Carolina, at the SESME's annual meeting. So we're excited to be present there. We'll be at IME West in February of 2024 in California as part of the Advanced Manufacturing Track and presenting there as well. So we look forward to, and if you'd like to learn more about the club, we look forward to hearing from you. Our website's www.industry40club.com. And we hope that you'll join us for future discussions. Thanks again, Jacques. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Jacques.
Bye-bye.